Hello everyone, you're in an all-new episode of The Final Cut, and today we're going to be going over 30 Days of Night. 30 Days of Night was written by Steve Niles. It is directed by David Slade. Stars Josh Hartnett as Eben Olison, Melissa George as Stella Olison, Danny Houston as Marlowe, and Ben Foster as the Stranger. So what is 30 Days of Night about? Well, for every vampire in Brooklyn, Twilight, or Once Bitten, we occasionally get a really hardcore vampire tale. In the vein of From Dusk Till Dawn, Near Dark, 30 Days of Night is a very brutal vampire story, and it takes place in this small town in Alaska where there is 30 days of night, no sunlight for 30 days. A group of vampires comes to this town and wreaks havoc. It starts with Ben Foster. He's the stranger who arrives in the town, and he's just really out there. Of course, much like Mad Max or other type of stories, once you have a stranger coming into town, usually there's more of his friends that follow behind. And here we have Danny Houston as Marlowe. He's the head of these vampires. And there's some differences with the graphic novel and the film. For instance, Eben and Stella are a married couple in the comic. They are separated here in the film. And there's this other head vampire. Marlowe is not the head vampire. There's this other head vampire who comes to stop the vampires because he wants to keep their identity a secret from the rest of society. We also don't have a subplot that involves vampire hunters arriving into town. So there's a lot of stuff changed from the graphic novel, but a lot of it, in essence, is still the same story. And originally, Steve Niles envisioned this as a film and later on reworked it into a graphic novel when he couldn't get the film greenlit. It was during the 90s, and that was kind of a slow period for vampire films. This is before Blade came into the running, before Underworld, and so many other films. So, an early comic book company called IDW published it, and that was their first major comic. Eventually, Sam Raimi got a hold of it, went down from director to producer, and hired David Slade to make 30 Days of Night. And this is a really, really well done horror film. If you're a fan of vampires or just horror films in general, this really has a creepy atmosphere, but this film is not for the faint of heart. These vampires are brutal. I mean, it's like the first Blade, Near Dark, and From Dusk Till Dawn. These aren't your glittering vampires, so to speak. These vampires find you and kill you, and take pleasure in doing it. And there's something to be had about the original vampires. They're back to being monsters. These aren't the romanticized vampires. And there's just something great with the plot, not only with Eben and Stella being separated, but also them dealing with the townfolk, their friends, them defending their town when it's pitch dark for 30 straight nights. And there's something very scary in that. Steve Niles heard about this in Alaska, and that's what influenced the plot of this film. He also took a lot of influence from Stephen King's Salem's Lot. And you can definitely tell there are some similarities to Salem's Lot and 30 Days a Night. But Josh Hartnett, he was on a period of independent films. He just filmed The Black Dahlia, and he was actually sick with mono for 2 weeks filming this. And eventually got better, but I have to say, he did a great job for being sick with that. You could tell he's going through a lot with his wife, and then just this winter environment, and then the nighttime getting to everybody. And they shot this in the course of 80 days. Some of it was real snow. They also went to a snow farm, but most of all, they made it seem like snow, and they built it on a set, this town type of open set. And that was really cool. Some scenes were in the daylight, some were modified to look like nighttime, but for the majority of the time, a lot of the scenes that were shot were primarily at nighttime, and it shows. This has such a great kind of color that's just kind of like a bluish night color. It feels very much like the color tones of the graphic novel, but the cinematography is just phenomenal for this movie. But there's some brutal scenes in this movie. There's this scene where this little girl gets turned to a vampire that's very scary. There's this part where the group of vampires attacks this woman, and she's like screaming and begging, saying, "Please God, please help me." And he's just like, "God, no God." Just like, no God. He tells her there's no God, and there's just something very scary in that. And he looks up into the sky, so there's almost something metaphorical about that, whether it be like in the heavens or the sun being God, something that could absolutely destroy these vampires. So there's some symbolism in that if you look that much into it. But for your casual viewing, for any hardcore horror fan, if you're in for a good time, monster scares, gore, you're going to really love 30 Days a Night. This was almost rated NC-17, had to be toned down a bit to be rated R. But it is a fantastic film. I really want to read the graphic novel. It's a trilogy of graphic novels, and this did spawn a straight-to-DVD sequel. But this original 30 Days a Night is a very well-done movie. It was also before the Twilight craze and like True Blood and stuff like that. Vampires were still pretty hardcore. They weren't cheesy. They weren't all glittery yet. So it's nice seeing old school vampires, and the rules apply to this movie. And it's weird because David Slade would end up going on to direct Twilight Saga Eclipse, and even though that movie was a bit more rough, it still wasn't as dark as this movie. 30 Days a Night is a magnificent film. If I had to give 30 Days a Night a score, I would give it a 3.5 out of 5 and a B+. It's a damn good vampire film. It's a lot of fun, and there's some deep emotional moments there. I think above all else, the acting is really good, but we really care about the characters, and the fact that these vampires are presented in this way, just almost like monsters going after their prey, predators after their prey, it really adds a lot to the emotion and stakes of the movie, and it is a really well done vampire film. If you're a fan of horror, fan of comics, fan of vampires, definitely check out 30 Days a Night. It definitely makes the final cut. Anyway, those are just my brief thoughts and review of 30 Days a Night. If you haven't seen 30 Days a Night, check it out. If you have seen 30 Days a Night, let me know in the comments below, what did you think of the film? If you like this video, click the like button, comment, and subscribe for more videos.